Ho ho buddies, welcome to Borderline Games. I am Gareth and this is the Chrono Jotter, episode 22. Last time, we solved the case. Turned out it was Sayurono, I think that's how you say her name. And we stopped her just before she was killing her third victim. But more important than that, Ran went upstairs to see her beloved Miss Sakura. To see how she was getting on, I guess. I can't remember what the context of that was, but basically, she suddenly stabbed Ran. For no reason, apparently. And we've got to find out why that was now. But before we do that, even, the chapter ended, and the game said that we advise you to look at Tama's memories. Now, to get Tama's memories was very, very difficult because I had to go through every single one of these, not this one. I had to go through every single exploration recall and make sure I completed all of those in order for Tama's memories to unlock on this branch one. So if you ever get this situation where you're playing this game and you can't unlock the branch recall, which is this one here. If this here says locked and that the conditions aren't met, I couldn't find anything online about how to do it. So what I basically had to do was go through every single exploration one and just made sure that every category had been met. I'm not sure which one triggered it, but one of them does. So if you ever get that situation, if you play this game ever, simply do that and go through every exploration recall. But we're going to look at that now. Let's go. Everything before Ran began to twist and distort, before finally fading out into infinite darkness. In 1923, at the end of August, the great Yanagawara family suffered a massive earthquake on the way to Gunma Prefecture. Like a pliant rope, the firm railroad was twisted and shredded by the swollen earth, and the train that the Yanagawara clan was riding in was flung down the cliffs and crushed into scrap metal by the other train cars. Oh my god. Tama and Duo, who'd accompanied them on this trip, had wanted to simply wait, then and there, for death to descend. But she discovered that the eldest daughter of the Yanagawara family, Shirahana Yanagawara, was trapped in the deepest recesses of the twisted railcar. Tama, who'd served the Yanagawara clan with her parents since she was young, had never spoken with this lady before. But when she saw Shirahana's slack-jawed and tearful visage, it enkindled in her the determination to survive. She struggled to her feet, kicked a corpse off from atop her legs, ripped apart the remains that obstructed her path, and using some other deceased victim's arm, protected herself from, and crowbarred open the razor-sharp shrapnel, Jesus Christ, that the steel doors had been twisted into. That's quite graphic. Tama and Duo saved Shirahana Yanagawara with the wreckage of the train, and supported her all the way until they reached an inhabited settlement. Uninhabited. Gotta get my tongue into gear. After that, Tama pawned the jewellery that her mother had left her, and rented a house in the village with the money she'd saved up from working for many years. After that, to maintain their lifestyle, she worked odd jobs wherever there was a need for an extra pair of hands in the village. With her first paycheck, she bought pen and paper to let Shirahana write a letter to her family's main residence in Yokohama. But whether it was because the main residence had been turned to ruins by the earthquake as well, or because the couriers were unable to successfully deliver the message after such a terrible disaster, the letter disappeared tracelessly. Shirahana Yanagawara spent her days in sorrow after that, but in stark contrast, Tama and Duo, who only knew how to live as a servant, found herself full of energy and vitality. Unable to find a connection to the world due to the massive changes to her life, Shirahana resorted to reckless acts of self-endangerment as a way to stimulate herself. She even attempted to kill herself multiple times, though all of those attempts were caught and stopped by Tama. After many years, Shirahana had finally come to terms with the reality of her situation and abandoned her hope of returning to her previous life. She began considering how she could repay Tama's generosity. Shirahana knew that if she were to vanish, Tama would very likely find herself directionless and adrift. So she decided she should try to expand Tama's world. Thus, she decided she would teach Tama Indura to read. She believed that literacy would cause Tama to gain the faculties of independent thought. Only by learning to think could one begin to possess self-actualization and begin to live for their own sake. After the frail Shirahana eventually perished from an illness, Tama was left all by herself. She strongly felt that the meaning of her existence had been to take care of Shirahana, and that in doing so she could experience and revel in the pleasure of existence. And because of this, she understood the meaning behind the young mistress's choice to teach her to read and write. Tama Indura began to write a manuscript that detailed her philosophy and the difficult life she'd led for the past few decades. In her late years, Tama Indura passed her last moments of life in Yokohama. Her manuscript was ultimately collated by others into a novel, which was formally published under the name of Shirahana Yanagawara. Ranabuki closed the book named Memories of the Kanto Earthquake. She found herself quite attracted to the ideas within the book. So treasuring another person was something that could eventually be transformed into a deeper and weightier philosophy. That granted more meaning then to her own obsession with Asakura, so she read about her in a book. Just as she'd hoped it would. Okay. Induro. Your letter. Yes, Ibuki-san? She can sense the deep-seated similarities between Asakura and Shirahana Yanagawara. That's why she's so concerned about Asakura. Yeah, that makes sense. But Asakura and her young mistress still have fundamental differences. And why does my head still hurt so intensely, much more than it did any of the previous times? Even though the memories have already been restored, it still hurts so much. Something's wrong. Are Indura's memories somehow different in nature from that of Koizumi Sensei and Asakura's? Okay, cool. So we've done it. That's the memory for Tama. Enter the recall. But I've done it now, so I don't think there's anything else to do, right? She heard while departing the observation deck. Yeah, I think we've done it. We can go back. I guess that's just to see if there's any other options you want to see. Any other diverging paths. Happy birthday, Asakura. After blowing the candle out, I turned the desk lamp next to the reading table on. A rectangular piece of black forest cake that had already been cut into 3 pieces was waiting there, glowing under the lamplight. It's pretty late. Let's only have a single piece. As I set the candle down with one hand, I flicked my phone screen open with the other and sent appreciative responses to all of my classmates who'd messaged me their well wishes for my birthday. Ever since my parents had passed away of natural causes, I'd grown used to celebrating my birthday on my own. There wasn't much of a reason for it. I just felt like it suited me more. This way. I looked at the bits of chocolate left on the fork, letting the familiar sweetness spread throughout my mouth. Ever since I'd moved here at the age of 5, I'd always have a Black Forest cake from the local store on my birthday. Today was the 13th time I'd gotten to enjoy this private pleasure, which was to say that as of today I was 17 and halfway through the course of my life. I leaned back in my chair, looking towards my bottle of micrometeorites, but I couldn't imagine giving the bottle to anybody the way my mother had done before. Oh, so it's from Asakura's point of view? Is this what's going on? It is? Oh god, right, okay. Let's see how things play out, I guess. Oh, okay. Good morning, Anne. I forgot to tell you yesterday, so I'm making up for it now. Happy birthday! As she spoke, she sat down in the desk ahead of me. Thanks. Right, last time you said you wanted to go travelling in Malaysia, over break, right? Did I ever mention that to you? But oh, actually, Anne, you've seen the news from yesterday as well, right? A pilot on the Japan-Malaysia airline route has come down with honeycomb amnesia syndrome as well. She made a big show out of drooping in disappointment. After all, because of this, the airline would surely cancel those flights, and that meant that if she still wanted to go to Malaysia, she'd have to go through a lot of trouble to change planes. Thankfully, when the pilot lost consciousness, the plane was over the ocean, and before the plane completely crashed, he was able to regain consciousness and force a controlled water landing. I nodded. The rain that the mother of humanity had called down to protect humankind had created significant problems for many parts of modern society. Who knew when she'd cease her actions and accept that humanity could face the things that it could not understand? But we don't seem to have had anybody here come down with honeycomb amnesia yet. If we have to catch it, I hope I catch it while we're in a class, so I can just wake up and find that classes are already over. Well, from what I remember, only 5% of people in the whole world have gotten honeycomb amnesia so far. If we're lucky, we probably won't catch it during our lifetimes. Oh, really? You sure do know a lot of interesting facts, Anne. They talk about it on the television pretty frequently. I gave her a pat on the shoulder as if to commiserate with her, and she started laughing with me. Oh, yesterday she'd come late. She had some late night fun with someone from the class around the hall before she snuck back home, did she now? I held my chin and considered teasing her about it before class started. Suddenly, however, a loud electronic buzzing erupted from the windows, tearing at my ears. It's interesting that we're from the perspective of Anne Secura now. At the same time, a dense rain began to fall. I turned to look outside the window. A giant green gelatinous object was lying on the school building and seemed to be slowly moving in the direction of the city. For some reason, its surface seemed to diffract the light, and blurry waves of colour seemed to radiate from it. But what is that? Looks like you're about to get what you wished for. I watched her try to support herself with her elbows, her head heavy and her eyes slowly shutting. Within a few seconds, she lost consciousness, and I quickly grabbed her to make sure she didn't collapse to the ground. The other students in the class fell to the floor as well, one by one. As they intermittently fell to the ground with heavy thuds, I tensed my shoulders in sympathy. They probably have a lot of new bruises waiting for them once they woke up. I helped settle my classmate into a comfortable position on her desk, and then performed a lazy stretch. Listening to the sounds of distant explosions and the alarms going off from all sorts of vehicles. This is the hour point of the morning rush hour. A lot of the car accidents have probably just taken place. There likely weren't many drivers who got enough warning to be able to brake their cars. Okay, so is this talking about... what is going on? We're talking about this weird honeycomb amnesia. Is this the first time this was introduced? Oh, okay, this is like the last recall, I think it said, so... I guess we'll see how many of them are willing to shell out for emergency brake and countermeasures against honeycomb amnesia syndrome. Right, okay. I took out my phone and carefully tiptoed out of the classroom, trying not to step on any of the students who were sleeping all over the floor. Though this was my first time personally experiencing the mother's reigns myself, for a moment I didn't know what to do. After all, I'd only ever been in the position of an observer before. But I quickly decided to visit the roof of the school, since I'd heard that only humans and objects created by humans got wet in the rain. If I walked about in the raindrops would avoid me, as though the mother of humanity didn't like the cut of my jib, for whatever reason. She's so petty. As I thought about the ridiculous expression that the mother of humanity's face would make when she grew irritated, I couldn't help but laugh out loud and walk just a little bit faster. The classroom was already quite close to the stairs leading to the roof. It only took me a few minutes to traverse the dead silent corridors and arrive at the door to the roof. Outside the door was the heavy sound of rain. Outside the door was the sound of heavy rain, is what that should be, right? That was something that the stilling rains had in common with the natural sounds of rainfall that I love so much. I pushed the handle down and opened the creaking door. A bleak grey cloudscape filled my eyes, hanging so low in the sky that it looked like it was about to fall to the earth. The raindrops were so dense that they seemed to blanket the whole world in a translucent curtain. Yep, I definitely loved watching the rain. I could feel my mood improving already, and the most interesting thing was yet to come. I stuck my hand into the rain with anticipation, and just as I expected, the raindrops circumvented my hand. So what would happen to my clothes then? Right, okay, so the rain just avoided hitting her entirely. I extended my arm further, letting the sleeve of my shirt enter the rain as well. The raindrops, whose trajectories had originally been perfectly straight, now wriggled like frightened caterpillars as they maintained a slight distance from my hand. And the results were the same as before. Apparently the Mother of Humanity didn't want anything to do with my clothes either. And the rain traced pristine arcs in the air as it dodged me. The Mother of Humanity's little bugs sure are clever. After the success of the experiment, I abandoned all my concerns and dashed into the rain. After all, everybody in the city besides me was in the midst of a dream anyway. I spread my arms, spinning in the rain, and hopped my way forward as the rain dodged even my immaculately maintained hair. I definitely couldn't let anybody who recognized me see me like this. It took me about a dozen seconds of wild flailing before I grew bored. I ceased my movements, thinking that perhaps I'd head to the other side of the roof and see what the big green ooze thing was up to. But then I turned around. I froze and my cheeks flushed red. Because there was a female student standing on the edge of the rooftop fence, watching me. She'd probably seen my entire wild performance just now. This is weird, isn't it? But something wasn't quite right. Watching her, I felt a sense of dissonance, but at the same time, she pulled at me somehow. It was an attraction so powerful that I even experienced a state of altered perception, where everything around us had completely disappeared, leaving just me and her in a pure white world. If I simply raised my hand, I could pull her into my embrace. If I took a single step, I could be right beside her. My breaths close enough to touch her cheek, and then I could begin to get to know her in a deeper and more intimate way than any human being could ever approach. But this attraction wasn't born of any sort of emotion. Rather, it was more like I felt the urge to approach her on an instinctive level. So I followed my instincts because I'd always done so. I stood up straight and walked towards her with my usual refined gait. I came closer and closer, but when I was close enough to see her expression, I found I didn't dare come any closer, because she was clearly completely awake and staring straight at me, despite being completely soaked by the rain. Now I understood where my attraction to her was coming from. I took a few steps forward until I stood before her. I stretched out my hand and prepared to introduce myself. Hello, beloved child of Mother of Humanity. My name is Anne Sakura. From your perspective, I suppose you could call me an extraterrestrial. Extraterrestrial? What? The beloved child's hair was drenched by rainwater and dangled in wet strands all over her face, making it hard for me to read her expression. At the same time, I was worried that the sound of the rain was also covering up my voice. She gave no answer to my greeting and turned as though to leave, so I immediately rushed in close and grabbed her wrist. After hesitating half a second, I chose not to use recall on her. Okay. With other people, touching them and then using recall to quickly view their entire life history was one of the greatest little pleasures of my existence. I didn't want to do such a thing to her, though. After I grabbed her wrist, she tried to pull away and began struggling against me. Her hair shook with her movements, allowing me to see her rain-stained face. Right. Ranabuki. I couldn't help but exclaim her name in surprise. Ranabuki had become infamous across the school as soon as she transferred in. There were rumours that she was from another country and that she wasn't mentally well. But I'd had the chance to interact with her a few times before this, and I hadn't detected anything extraordinary in her. I let go of her wrist and Ran immediately pulled her hand to her chest and stared nervously at me, shuffling her feet and starting to shy away from me. So that's how it is. The previous beloved child must have perished then. What even is the mother of humanity trying to accomplish with all this? Let's get back inside for now. I'd be ashamed of myself if I just let you sit outside in the rain by yourself. Ranabuki remained silent, turning to look in the gelatinous green shape's direction. Don't worry about that big thing. I just used my recall on it. It's just a big clump of solidified subsonic vibrations. It'll disappear on its own in a few hours. I tried taking Ranabuki's hand again. This time she didn't resist me. Do you understand these things? Uh-huh. I do. From the perspective of the mother of humanity, I'm the exact same as that thing. And here I thought only I could see them. So the fish and the flowers crawling over my arm. Can you see those too? I looked down. Clearly there was nothing on Ran's arm. It was only now that I remembered that, according to the rumours, part of Ranabuki's mental illness was that she'd occasionally shout and scream in the middle of the class and start speaking nonsense. Oh. It seemed like she suffered from a mental illness that caused her to hallucinate. No matter what answer I gave her, it'd probably end up poorly. I don't see 'em. They're your hallucinations. So you're here to trick me as well. Shouting, Ran pulled her arm free from my grasp and started to run. You were the one who was shouting nasty things at me from the road yesterday too, weren't you? Why did you have to do that? I just couldn't solve the last problem. Why did you have to shout at me? She pulled at her own hair with her hands and dashed off towards the roof entrance. She didn't make it 2 steps before she tripped over her own feet and fell to the floor. I immediately rushed over and helped her up, letting her use my shoulder. When Ranabuki's rain-soaked sleeves touched me, all the moisture in them immediately fled like a hive of panicked ants, scattering away in all directions. Ran clutched my shoulder with a death grip, as though she wanted to impale my flesh with her fingernails. It was quite painful, but I still did my best to help her back into the school building before immediately depositing her next to the wall and telling her to sit. Her condition ought to be relatively stable. Otherwise, the school wouldn't have told her to come to class. I took off my jacket and started wiping Ran's hair with it. Just like before, all the moisture in Ran's hair fled at my touch. Ran neither moved nor spoke a word. Her emotions had frozen over as quickly as they'd inflamed just now. She gave me free rein while I cleaned her hair. This close to her, it was actually kind of addicting. I took her by the face, my jacket the only barrier between my hand and her skin. Ran closed my eyes, allowing me to drive all the rainwater off of her face. After I finished wiping all the rainwater on our lips, with a finger she spoke. What is the mother of humanity? Are you ready to hear now? I wrapped my hands in my jacket and rubbed them until all the rain had vanished. Enough with the questions, just tell me. Looks like she's completely back to normal. Well, basically, the mother of humanity is the Earth itself. She has her own consciousness and wants to protect you humans. That's pretty much about it. I don't understand. I let go of her hands. It was time to wipe her thighs. Well, I don't really know her very well either. She's been alive for, what, 4.6 billion years now? If I had to recall all of that, I'd pretty sure I'd die. I wrapped her thighs in my jacket and began to wipe them down, starting from the hips and wiping towards the calves. Then why did you act like a know-it-all, using all those terms I didn't understand back there? What did you not understand? I used my right hand to lift the calf of her leg, forcing all the water out of her socks while taking off her shoe with my left hand. All that about being the beloved child of the mother of what the hell ever. Well, I don't exactly know everything about that either. I've only been able to observe in my recalls. They say the beloved child is like the mother of humanity, and that they can control every aspect of the earth at will. Though, looking at you, I don't think you can do that at all. So why did you say I was I was this child or whatever? After I took her shoe off, I started wiping the arch of her foot. Apparently Ran was quite ticklish because she closed her mouth and twisted her head, struggling not to giggle. Because she stayed awake, despite being drenched by the rain. I let go of Ran's foot, so that she could speak again. As expected, she panted as she spoke. I wanted to ask what was going on myself. Why you didn't get wet in the rain, and why everyone else fell unconscious all of a sudden. Basically, when a human being sees a supernatural phenomenon or entity, the whole region will begin to rain, and then all humans within that region will fall unconscious, and also lose their memories before and after the incident. The rain itself will avoid making contact with the supernatural phenomenon in question. The definition of supernatural is defined by the mother. Just assume that she designed this system for the sake of protecting humanity, basically. But it rains normally too, doesn't it? I nodded, and then helped her put on her shoes, and then changed positions and started working on her other leg. Today's rain was actually a swarm of transparent liquid organisms which enter the brains of humans to devour their memories. It's a bit like the parasite in humanity, actually. Doesn't hearing that make you start to think that your very own brain has become your enemy now? Then we'll just have to become organisms that think with every cell in our bodies, I suppose. The fact that Ran had understood my reference cheered me so much that I accidentally pinched her thigh in excitement. Ran immediately shied away and looked warily at me. Whoops! I used too much strength there. Sorry, let's continue. Ran, still doubtful, relaxed her body again, letting me continue to help wipe the rain off of her. In any case, if you could stay awake after getting drenched by the rain, that means that to the mother of humanity you're a being that exists between the human and supernatural. I'm pretty sure the beloved child is the only being that fits those conditions after all. She's the one that set the standards in the first place. I don't know, I don't feel like there's anything special about myself. Because it's only just begun. The beloved child of the mother of humanity will inevitably come into contact with more and more so-called supernatural things in the future. But that's going to be a problem for you, isn't it? I took off the shoe of her left foot as well, and wrapped her foot in my jacket before gently gripping her toes. And that's why we should become friends. Why? Well, you need me to help you deal with all the supernatural stuff that's going to come after you eventually. And I'd like to make a friend that I can actually talk about these things with. After all, if I mentioned any of those things to a human, it definitely caused the rain to start falling. My finger slid downwards until it reached the centre of the palm of her foot. Let's get along with each other starting now, okay, Ibuki? She didn't answer me, but rather turned her head away and avoided my eyes. Well, I didn't want her to refuse me, so I could only start thinking. Trying to come up with something to say that would bring the two of us closer together. Well, maybe after you finish wiping my feet. I hadn't expected Ibuki to speak first. You could do my back as well? Sakura. What Ran wanted to express with that statement was self-evident, and a smile blossomed on my face in response. Of course! No problem. Okay. Ibuki, let's walk home together, now that school's out. Oh, Ibuki, what a coincidence. Your class has swimming lessons today too. Ibuki, what would you like to have? I'll foot the bill. Ibuki, after school we should go and... You're so annoying, Sakura. Didn't expect that. I'd known Ranabuki for about 3 months at this point, and during this time she hadn't shown any serious symptoms of her illness. It was indeed as I'd expected. She'd had to stabilise her mental state through therapy before she was allowed to come back to school. Auditory hallucinations remained consistent though. She often told me that people were bullying her, or that people were quietly scheming to hurt her. But based on what I knew, there was no bullying going on anywhere at school, and as for her classmates, rather than seeing Ibuki as a convenient victim, most of them were afraid to approach Ibuki more than anything. After all, she had a devil-may-care loner attitude about her, and whenever she was around me, she always constantly acted as though she was sick of me. But in reality, she was all bark and no bite. Whenever I proposed that we go somewhere together to do something together, she never put up any actual opposition to my plans. The Ranabuki always had an attitude, but actually always listened to everything I said, was super adorable. Oh, come on. You love it when I annoy you. By hanging out with you. It's not like you've got any friends but me anyway. I do too have friends. I have Aya at home, and there's Koizumi-sensei at school. The Ranabuki, who was tripping over her own words after I teased her, was also very adorable as well. So this is like a version of Ranabuki's real life, and I guess the question is whether Ansakura herself is a hallucination or not. Guess? Well, one of them is basically your adoptive mother, and the other one's a teacher at your school. Face it, that doesn't count. Sakura, you're so annoying. Ibuki repeated her words and then kept scarfing down the bento box I'd made for her anyway. After school's over, come over to my house today. Why? I don't want to. You've been making me go out with you to all sorts of places every single afternoon recently. I want to go home earlier today. Ibuki began to pace back and forth in front of my bookshelf. As soon as she'd gotten to my room, I knew that she'd enjoyed reading a lot, particularly detective novels. So I didn't plan on interrupting her. I figured I'd let her satisfy herself before I talked to her. I should buy and read some detective novels in the future as well. Otherwise, I won't be able to keep up when she talks about them. Sakura, do you not have any non-fiction books? Ibuki's question surprised me a bit. Most people wouldn't notice details like that, and while I was buying books, I hadn't even considered whether they were fiction or non-fiction. I guess not. I stood up and approached the bookcase as well, sweeping the various fiction novels and fantasy comics with my eyes. Put simply, every single book on the bookshelf was something that an author had invented rather than something that had happened in reality. But I mean, that's normal, isn't it? Would most people buy the biographies of famous people or books about historical events or something? People like you, who have a whole bookshelf full of books. Most likely, yeah. They'd have at least 1 or 2 non-fiction books. I nodded. I suppose that it was the recalls causing me to subconsciously avoid non-fiction books. It was the recalls causing her to avoid non-fiction books. After all, I could view as many things that happened in reality as I wanted. Ah, this book! Due to her illness, Ibuki barely expressed intense positive emotions, but this time she'd spoken in a much higher pitch than normal, and it actually startled me. Sakura, see, you do have a non-fiction book here after all. Have you read this one? The book she was holding was named Memories of the Kanto Earthquake. Oh, the author was someone named Shirahana Yanagawara. Oh, yes, I've read that. The true name of the author was Tama Induo, right? Ran nodded, looking quite excited. I like this book a lot. Sakura, how'd you come upon this book? This is the only non-fiction book you've got in the whole bookshelf, isn't it? Honestly, I don't even remember buying this book. Anyway, since we're already here, we might as well get to the point. I turned and headed to my desk, grabbed the glass bottle full of meteorites, and gestured for Ibuki to come over and sit. She frowned. Not sure what I was up to, but obediently came over to the table anyway, still holding the book. I called you to my house just to show you this. I pulled open the stopper to the bottle and poured a few meteorites out. The sound they made as they splashed across my desk sounded a lot like raindrops falling on an umbrella, which I liked a lot. These are meteorites from my own world. They landed on the Earth along with us, and we kept them as a memento, I guess. My ancestors have kept and passed them down through the generations, and ultimately my mother passed them into my hands. Ran picked up one of the stones and inspected it closely, not making a sound. After we arrived on Earth, the mother of humanity appeared before us. She greatly disliked us beings, who looked like humans externally but were completely different internally. But we weren't invaders or anything. We just wanted to find a place to live. So we kept pretending to be Earthlings and survived all the way to the present day. How about your parents? I picked up a meteorite as well and held it in my palm. All I had to do was use recall on it, and I could see the faces of my father and mother as they were while they were alive, anytime I wanted. Our lifespan is only 40 years long. They passed away when they were 30-something. I don't have any evidence, but I think that it's some kind of poison that the mother of humanity has stealthily dosed us with. What, so you could live much longer before? Well, no. We've always been limited to a lifespan of, say, 40 years, but the ability that every one of us had to use recall, that's been disappearing slowly, over time. Like, as an example, since about 1,000 years ago, our people started losing the power to recall at the age of 30. And if we fast forward to the present, my mother lost her power to recall at the age of 18. So I'll probably lose the power of recall sometime next year. After that happens, I'll just be a perfectly ordinary, if slightly short-lived Earthling, I guess. Perhaps the mother of humanity's plan is to just slowly turn us all into Earthlings that way. I laughed as I stretched. Ibuki's expression was even more serious than I'd anticipated. I wish I knew which aspect of the situation she was most worried about. I'm not worried about if I can use the power of recall or not, because of how short our lifespans are. Our people generally tend to live their lives in one or two ways. One of those ways is to struggle their whole lives, not wasting a fraction of a single second, reaching out and trying to experience the entirety of the world with our power before we lose it. The other way to live like me, I figure, since we're not long for the world, we might as well just live however we like. Oh, but my mother told me that we all share our one tendency in common. I reached out and pulled that copy of Memories of the Kanto Earthquake back to myself. At a certain stage in our lives, we all tend to discover, this is the meaning of my life. This is the reason why I live. And then we embark on a journey to find some way to extend our limited lifespans so that we can fulfill our life's meaning. So you figured out the meaning of your life then? I shook my head, tapping the book with a finger. Absolutely not. I feel like it doesn't matter at all when I die. There's nothing that I have to stay alive to do, or anything that I have to stay alive to witness. But my parents came to the decision that their lives' meanings were each other, after they met each other. And they embarked on the journey to find a way to be able to spend more time together. Of course they failed. None of our race has ever succeeded in finding a way to extend their lifespans. This is so weird. That's why after I heard this book was about how the author took another person to be the meaning of their life, and how she was able to use this as a motivation. Even after she lost that person, I decided to buy it to see if it could inspire me. But after reading it, I shrugged, to indicate that I hadn't really gotten much of value out of the book. Ibuki gathered the scattered meteorites on the table, and placed them back into the glass bottle one by one. And here I thought that you enjoyed the time you spent with me. I blinked. No matter how often she showed that kind of expression, I always thought that Ibuki sure was cute every single time. Well, of course I'm having fun, but making just having fun into the meaning of your existence to the point where it transforms the way in which you live, that's a bit tough. But I'm pretty happy that I could come to meet you before becoming a short-lived Earthling. Maybe the fact that I can rest easy and not worry about when my life will come to an end is all because of you. I took her around his shoulders. She didn't resist me and took the opportunity to lean into my lap. Plus, you're the beloved child of the mother. I'm very lucky that I was able to meet you at all. And if I weren't, would you not want to be my friend then? Oh. Now that was a real hardball question. I scrunched up my face, trying my best to look tormented by the question, and answered. Probably we'd still be friends, because right now you look pretty much indistinguishable from a regular human. And you don't seem like any of the beloved children I've seen in my recalls before, where all sorts of supernatural things were coming out the woodwork to pick a fight with them. For all I know, maybe you're just an ordinary earthling, and I'm totally wrong that you're the beloved child. But even if that's so, I'd still like to be with you. So even if you weren't the beloved child, I'd still be your friend. Of course, Ibuki was definitely the beloved child. The fact that she'd gotten drenched by the rain that day was incontrovertible proof. Well, alright then. You've only got until the age of 40. Anyway, so I don't mind spending the next 20 years with you, I guess. Oh, excellent. Looks like I can rest easy and retire early. Ibuki broke into a smile at my words. As she laughed, she gently draped a hand over the back of mine. Next time you should come to our house. I'd like for you to meet Miho and Aya. I nodded, with anticipation sprouting in my heart. 3 days after Ibuki stepped foot into the house, she awkwardly invited me to visit her own house for dinner. Okay, and we're going to call that another episode of Borderline Games. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Chrono Jotter. What's going to happen? Like, we're now looking at an aspect of Ranabuki's life. So whether all we're seeing is Ranabuki's delusion or whether there is some truth that there's an alien is another thing. But I guess we'll find out next time on Borderline Games. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good evening. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.